Hi, and welcome to our first NCBA coffee break series. I'm Nathan Willner, NCBA's Government Affairs Officer, and I'm really excited to kick us off with Joey Wilkins as our first guest. Joey works for ProVest. He's the Chief Compliance Officer there and in-house counsel. Before we get started in talking about process servers and compliance, Joey, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about the kind of work you do over at ProVest.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to participate today. We are excited to be a part of this. As you mentioned, my name is Joey Wilkins. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer and in-house counsel at ProVest. I have been involved in the process serving world for about 10 years now, and involved in creditors' rights for about 15. So I've got a pretty extensive background in what we do, and have seen a little bit of everything along the way. So just appreciate the opportunity to try to share some of what we've seen over the years.
That's great, and I'm sure our listeners are going to be intrigued because all of our members use process servers, when filing a lawsuit. And so let's just get started with some, best practices. And so beyond GPS and photos that many people think of as being key components of process server compliance, what other key components do law firms need to consider?
Well, photo and GPS records are important, right? That's how we verify where the server was at when the service took place. But specifically, those data points, they're more useful than for just that. So it's important that your vendor is also using the photo and GPS for a route feasibility analysis. And this is an analysis that we do to ensure that the route the server reported for that day is feasible, that they could have been where they said they were, in between the stops, that there was enough time to accomplish that. So that's also a very important analysis to bake in with the GPS review. Ensuring that a physical description is obtained is also a key component to our compliance. It's something that we look for on every single job. If there's ever a service challenge, that's the first thing that is used to defend the service is well, who did you serve? It's crucial to make sure that information is available. These days during COVID, it's increasingly more common for contact to be made through some sort of video doorbell or video device. It's tricky. While the process server is having direct contact with the defendant, it may not be physical contact. And in a lot of states, that's not considered good service. So, to ensure that physical description is there to review those notes, that it wasn't just contact through a doorbell. We require our servers to physically observe the person. If they don't want to open the door, we ask them to move the drapery to the side so they can see them through a window, or advise them that they're going to lay the papers down on the sidewalk and retreat back to the car and watch the defendant come outside and retrieve those papers. So some way we ensure that there is a physical description that can be gathered in the service process.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important. And unfortunately, I can think of some instances where, the affidavit of service said it was described the age and the gender of the person, and clearly the person in court was not that person. So that does happen occasionally, which brings me to my next question. Is it important for collection law firms to be diligent about the compliance of their process server vendors? In other words, does the law firm have to worry about the vendor's compliance when it comes to service?
Yeah, in today's environment, I see it as crucial for the firms to ensure that their vendor is operating in a compliant manner. This only serves their interest and their clients' interest. This kind of overview should include regular audits, policy reviews of the vendor to make sure that those policies are in place and they're current and they're satisfactory for the objective. Adherence to the firm's SOPs and directives that they hand down to the process server. Failure in any of these areas can result in liability for the firm. So it's extremely important that there's some overview and oversight that takes place.
So when you're talking about liability, and there are different payment schemes for process servers and their clients. So, for instance, some get charged a different rate when the complaint and summons are actually served, as opposed to when the process server just goes out to the location and can't effectuate service, is there a liability associated with paying more for a serve or less for a non-serve? How does that play into things that law firms need to be concerned about?
Yeah, we see that as a huge risk. I mean, essentially what that's doing is you're providing a financial incentive for the process server to maybe not be honest or to cut corners. If they are being financially punished for non-serving a job that should appropriately be non-served, then that's not helping anybody in the process. We do think that it's crucial that there are non-serve objectives or requirements that are clear and laid out for the server, so they know that there is an end to this job. I'm not going to be expected to make 20 attempts. Once my required diligence is met, served or non-served, and this is a completed job, and they know that they're going to be paid the same. We see that as an absolute must. We don't do any differential pricing. ProVest as a company doesn't. We're aware that's still out there. It's more common in certain pockets of the country than in others. But it's just something that we see as a huge compliance risk and something that we just don't participate in.
So again, from your perspective, having one fee regardless of the outcome is a better way to not entice someone to do something maybe inappropriate.
Yeah, and maybe they're not falsifying the return, but maybe they're cutting corners, or maybe they are, talking to a neighbor when we're not supposed to be doing that. Maybe there's a ton of things that they could be doing to push the envelope, and we just don't want to incentivize any reckless behavior by our process servers.
So that brings me to the perspective of cost versus compliance. I know many people, when they shop for a vendor, whether it be in their own personal life or in their office, are looking for the cheapest way to save money. Obviously, we're just coming out of a tough period of time in this country where economics are definitely part of the way you're running your operation. So what's that balance of cost versus compliance, and why is cost in and of itself not the way to maybe pick a vendor or a process serving company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, we're all in business. Obviously, cost plays a part in the decision, of who to use. But I feel like it should be maybe a second or third tier, data point in that decision tree. It's, you as a law firm or as a creditor need to be confident that your process server and all your vendors can go out and perform the job that you've contracted them to do. That you don't have to worry about them creating additional risk. Price is one thing, but having a concern out there, having a worry that the server is cutting those corners or is maybe doing something that they're not supposed to do and creating that extra risk, it's just not worth it. I mean, there are multiple facets of compliance where the program to monitor the server's licensing. Maybe it's the background check program or the education program that you have in place with your process server. All that stuff is vital, and the firms really need to have a comfort level that the minimums are being met before you get into whether or not this is a good fit financially. It's whether or not they can perform the job we're asking to do.
Great. Yeah, I think that's some great advice and some perspectives that law firms should definitely take a look at when looking to engage with a process serving company. And finally, is there any education, any materials regarding private process servers and compliance that maybe some of our members could take a look at?
Yeah, we have some information that we give out, to our clients commonly that we would be happy to share. First, I guess the biggest helpful document I would think is the process serving standards for the collection industry. And this document and these standards are a result of a summit that was held in Denver several years ago with many industry participants, creditors, law firms, all the players were there and had input into these standards. And it was kind of set a baseline for this particular vendor category of how they should be operating. And we also have a top 10 list of questions that you should be asking your process server. Maybe it's stuff that you're not aware, or stuff that maybe doesn't come to mind that you should be inquiring about that will shed light on that relationship. And we'll be happy to make both those documents available.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great materials, and we'll be happy to post those links for listeners to be able to take a look at those educational materials. And that brings us to the end of our first coffee break. And I really appreciate you, Joey, and ProVest for joining us today and real quickly giving us a little taste of some information we need to be compliant and as we're looking at process servers and vendors. So thank you very much for joining us today. And with that, we're going to sign off and thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.